This, as you can see, is an angel, and this, indeed, as you can also see, is a sword, and this is a confraternity. Actually, it's a copy of the ancient statutes of a particular confraternity of the Roman Catholic Church. My name is Father Peter Junipero Hannah. I'm the promoter of Angelic Warfare West, a chapter of the Angelic Warfare Confraternity in the Western United States. And this is the launch video of Pure Truth, where we're going to be exploring different aspects of the Angelic Warfare Confraternity and also how to live and promote the virtue of chastity in our world. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about what a confraternity is, and then in the next, we'll look forward to looking at more of the angelic and the warfare aspect. So first of all, what is a confraternity? The Church speaks of confraternities as particular kinds of associations of the faithful, where men and women bind themselves together in a spiritual pact where they dedicate themselves to promoting some evangelical or spiritual work in the world. So there's a confraternity dedicated to praying and promoting the rosary. You could have a confraternity dedicated to the work of evangelism or working with and assisting the poor. The Angelic Warfare Confraternity is especially dedicated to living and promoting the virtue of chastity in our world. The great image that comes to mind when we think of what confraternities are is the body of Christ, St. Paul's image from one of his letters to the Corinthians, where he speaks of the body of Christ as this unity of all of the baptized and believing members of Christ who are bound together in a kind of union, a spiritual union. Now, St. Paul isn't speaking of this unity among Christians in a kind of superficial or cliched way where we all think alike, or we get together and sort of sing songs and dance in the woods or something. What St. Paul's referring to is a profound and real metaphysical unity where all Christians are bound to and support one another. So when he says one member of the body suffers dishonor, all of the rest of the members suffer with it. When one member, he says, is honored, all of the members share in the honor of the one. The Angelic Warfare Confraternity is specifically dedicated then to strengthening the body of Christ, almost as a kind of healing agent within the body of Christ to promote and live the virtue of chastity, and so strengthen the Church in its mission. So where does the Angelic Warfare Confraternity come from? You can read on our website a little more detail than I can give here, but very briefly, it comes from a particular event in the life of St. Thomas Aquinas, where he experienced a temptation against chastity and was rescued from it by the assistance of two angels, who then bestowed on him a cord that he wore around his waist for the rest of his life and protected him to a remarkable degree in living the virtue of chastity. After he died and was eventually canonized, he had a reputation among his Dominican brothers for a remarkable degree of innocence and purity in his life, and lay men and women began kind of seeking Aquinas' intercession to help them live the virtue of chastity, and even wearing cords in imitation of Aquinas. Eventually, if you fast forward to the 17th century, there was a Dominican father who was at the University of Louvain in Belgium, and he was interested in this devotion that had cropped up around Aquinas. So he made a little pilgrimage to Vercelli, Italy, where the sacred cord that Aquinas had worn during his life was, and he gathered as much information about this cord and the devotion that had cropped up around it that he could. He then went back to the University of Louvain in Belgium and began promoting it to the students and faculty at the university, and that, as far as we know, was the first kind of official society that began sort of living this Angelic Warfare Confraternity devotion. The confraternity, though, didn't receive its kind of official ecclesiastical approbation until 1727, when Benedict XIII, as Pope, gave it as kind of official foundation, and it remains a valid and pertinent and powerful confraternity and source of strength for the Church today. How is the Angelic Warfare Confraternity relevant today? In many ways, I think it's more relevant than it's ever been, and I say that for a couple reasons. First is, I don't think it's by accident that the Angelic Warfare Confraternity cropped up in a university culture. It's often in university culture where young people are coming of age, exploring new ideas, having new experiences, where temptations against chastity can be especially strong. If you fast forward to today's world, these temptations have seemingly multiplied extravagantly. So we've seen a real decline in the standards of modesty in dress and speech in our own culture in the last several decades. From the media that's readily available and promoted by advertising agencies, to television, to the film industry, to the rampant real evils that are promoted by the pornography industry, the temptations against chastity are especially strong, and especially for young people today. So the virtue of chastity is perhaps more challenging to live today, but it's all the more necessary to intentionally cultivate and live it in a full way as Christians and as Catholics. Now, what is chastity? Well, we're used to thinking of chastity kind of as a list of don'ts, right? Don't do this, avoid that, or you're going to get in trouble with God. There's a deeper and more positive sense of what chastity is, and this is related to the university culture out of which it came as well. Chastity frees us. It harmonizes and integrates our mind and our soul and our body, all that we are, our human sexuality, and it orders it and frees us so that we can contemplate the world. Thomas Aquinas was known not only for his chastity, but for his remarkable intellect. And ultimately, the virtue of chastity strengthens us and frees us so that we can contemplate the truth and the beauty and the goodness of the world God has created all around us, and eventually contemplate and seek that union with God Himself. So chastity is more difficult, but more necessary today, and it assists everything that we are in growing and as a foundation for growth in the spiritual and Christian life. So how do you join the Angelic Warfare Confraternity? I encourage you to look at our website for all the details of how that's done. If we go back to the copy of the ancient statutes of the confraternity from the 17th century, the first stipulation that was set forth then is essentially the same today. It says, all who would wage battle under the heavenly banner of the angelic doctor, St. Thomas Aquinas, let their names be inscribed in a book prepared by the Fathers Preachers, that's the Dominicans, so that they can share in all the indulgences and prayers of the confraternity. So there are specific prayers that you would commit yourself to saying for the rest of your life, also to pray for others in the confraternity, and there are also indulgences that popes through the years have attached to various observances through the year. So I encourage you to check out our website. I encourage you to pray for the grace of chastity in your own life, and if you feel so led, to look into joining this confraternity.